All right, I'm gonna go through the patch notes. Please don't spoil me in the chat. I'm gonna go from top to finish. No spoils in chat. Let me read it at my own pace. It's not that long. It's about 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 pages. So it's not gonna take that long, okay? So just let me go through this in my own pace. There's some parts we can skip. Okay, so Act 4, we know this already. We don't have to talk about this. We don't have to talk about this either. Rise to the Abyssal League, we don't have to talk about this either. We know these things. Major character balance rework, okay, we already know this is happening. Support gem system overhaul, we know most of this, but I can skim through it real quick. One of the major issues, they're just talking about the reasoning behind it. They already talked about this. We've seen this. Move restriction, we know. Many support multiple tiers, we talked about this. We've seen it. The linear support have covered that. Number of support gems with simple effects have been renamed with the names that are more obviously hint at their functionality. Okay, so a bunch of renames. That's about it. Okay, good. And they have Lightning, Cold, Fire, Chaos Infusion and been renamed to Lightning, Cold, Fire, Chaos Attunement. It's just a bunch of renames. We don't have to go through those things. So we're skipping that. So new content. I just got confirmation from Jonathan saying that when you sprint as a player, your minions will also become faster when you are sprinting. So when you sprint, your minions gets faster. Bro, we're gonna be sprinting around minions, enemies. Holy shit. Okay, anyways. Add a new strength skill gem, Fortified Cry, which is a perform more cry that grants guard and causes subsequent shield attacks or releasing a power shockwave when dealing damage. Skills cooldown can be bypassed by expending endurance charges. Forge Hammer, we saw the footage of this. Hurl a fiery hammer that slams to the ground and lodges there. While the hammer is lodged in the ground, reusing the skill recalls the hammer and resets the skill's cooldown. Alternatively, use a war cry near the lodged hammer, cause it to shatter, releasing a number of molten fissures in a spiral. Which, honestly, the spiral fissures in the footage we've seen looked insane. Like, it looked so cool. It's probably the best, I think, the Warriors class or thematic approach has ever looked in PoE 2. Ancestor Cry, performing a war cry using glory, gained by igniting enemies to turn you into an embodiment of Kaum. While embodying Kaum, your footsteps trigger volcanic steps, melee strikes and slabs are ancestrally boosted, and your melee attack hits trigger volcanic eruptions. Also looks freaking insane. Toxic Domain from a dexterity skill creates a toxic bloom on the ground around you. While in the bloom, you have increased skill cost, regenerate life, and your predictable attacks attach toxic pustules, which can be poison. Pustules will detonate after duration or when enough poison has been applied, dealing damage and applying poison in an area around it. You get ice-tipped arrows. We saw this. Radioactive bow or spear, empowering your next barrageable bow or projectile spear attack to create ice fragments and hit. And the cooldown can be bypassed by expending frenzy charges. We get frost darts from an intelligence skill, conjure a number of icy projectile launched towards a target. Projectiles a hit, a chill or frozen target creates a chunk of ice that deal additional damage when impacting the ground. Consumes a cold infusion if possible to cause each projectile to lodge into the enemy, then explode. I like the introduction they have with the infusions. It was really cool, the idea of that, and it really makes the elemental, the thematic of spell casting a little more interesting. Another strength persistent buff, Iron Ward, while active, stores a percentage of the physical damage that is prevented by your armor or other sources of damage reduction. Usually the skill releases the stored damage as a nova of spikes. Then we're getting Mortar Cannon. We saw this. Raises the cannon total, which uses your socketed grenade skills with significantly improved cooldown recovery rate. We get a dexterity persistent buff called Mirage Archer. We saw this. While active, dodge rolling will create a barrage that uses socketed range attacks for a short duration, then vanish. You cannot create another Mirage while one exists or for a short time after one vanishes. Dodge rolling while you are unable to create a new Mirage will restart this timer. Add a new intelligence persistent gem with a ravenous swarm while active and enemies are nearby. Swarms of insects emerge from your body to pursue enemies. The swarms are untargetable minions that periodically attack and poison enemies within the swarm. What? That sounds dope as fuck. Because now with sprint, we are less forced into using the blink for most minion builds, I would assume. Dude, this sounds fucking amazing. Huh. Intelligence persistent siphon elements while active has a chance to create an infusion remnant when you freeze shock or ignite a target. Okay, that's again for the infusion stacky stuff. Grim Feast is coming back. Instead of granting energy shield, it now allows you to collect remnants from your dead reviving minions, then activate the skill to instantly revive minions based on their maximum life. What? Instead of granting energy shield, it now allows you to collect remnants from your dead reviving minions to activate the skill to instantly revive minions based on the maximum life. Okay. Okay. Oh, well, we'll see how that feels, but okay. Not opposed to it. I mean, again, like a lot of these changes, I can't tell if it's going to feel good or not without playing it. I mean, DD builds would probably love this shit. Minion builds eating good, it seems. Bro, the changes to it looks dope. Add your Keystone passive northwest. This is the Hollow Palm. We saw that in the footage. And we get the Ritual Cadence, charging invocation trigger. We saw this in the footage. And then we get the Black Flame Covenant. Also saw this in the footage. Again, I'm going to skip the things we've already seen. We get the Walker of the Wilds. Battle leads to recover basic elemental damage instead of fist. We saw this in the footage. Following new currency, your orbs will start dropping for late campaign, and the maps, which is greater orb transmutation, perfect orb transmutation. These are the tiered currency for augments, chaos orbs, exalted orbs. These greater and perfect orbs each have their own minimum modifier level for the modifier they add to an item, which I think is really cool. And then the Hinekora lock is being added, and a bunch of unique items, base type items, endgame maps, and 15 new omens, which we only saw like 4 or 5 of, right? So that's pretty cool as well. Here's some endgame changes. Currently, access to most pinnacle content requires the same key at the easiest and most difficult version of the content. This creates a negative feeling where the lower difficulty, instead of wanting to run the content, you're often better off just selling it to someone who can run it at maximum difficulty. So they had a similar problem with this in PoE 1 actually, and they addressed it in a similar fashion. So to address this, each content, excluding Arbiter of Ash, will now drop splinters, which will not form into singular items. Instead of using the singular combined item in the Realm Gate, you can now just bring your splinters. Upon inserting the splinters in the Realm Gate, an interface will appear, allowing you to pick your difficulty, each with different entry costs. So the higher difficulty costs more splinters. I think this is a really good system. It also means that the idea of getting it feels better, especially when it comes to the ritual mechanic, to get access to the ritual boss. As a result of these changes, corresponding Atlas passive no longer affects the difficulty of the content. It has been changed to purely affect the content in the maps of the Atlas. Existing simulacrums breaches audience of the key can be right-clicked to grant 100 of the relevant splinter that can no longer be used in the Realm Gate. Arbiter of Ash boss fights does static difficulty counter with infinite portals. Previously only infinite portals at difficulty 0. The rewards of this fight now match difficulty 4 rewards. And the Arbiter of Ash passive skill tree has been removed. Some of the bonuses have become inherent to the Arbiter Ash's drops. And the Uber version, when you're doing the max boss nodes on the Atlas passive and you kill a Citadel boss, will now drop the Uber versions for this. Trying map boss Atlas passive points have been adjusted. These are now obtained by slaying a map boss in Area 79 plus with a map with at least 6 modifiers, slaying a map boss in Area level 80, slaying an anomaly map boss in Area 79 with at least 6 modifiers, and a Citadel boss. Completing the Pinnacle Flame quest, all Wrath Origin of Fall no longer spawns in logbooks. Interesting. So I guess they're doing the same process there with splinters, I would assume. I'm not sure. Mysterious anomalies can now appear on... Oh, mysterious anomalies can now appear on the Atlas. Oh. Modifiers on Waystones have been reworked. Now every modifier comes with a downside. And some amount of additional Waystone drop chances. So basically what they're doing is that every modifier on the map is following the same system they have in PoE 1, where every modifier has a downside, but does provide you with increased either... quantity, rarity, or pack size is my understanding, right? So you can have a map that has a bunch of modifiers that only gives you one type of these, or you can have a little mix of it. So some maps will have a lot of pack size, some maps will have a little rarity or quantity, or a mixture of 2 or all 3. Downside modifier has been made weaker to account for the ability to have more present than before to obviously offset this. And unidentified corrupted waystone can now be used to access corrupted nexus. Waystones can no longer have greater than 8 modifiers when corrupted. Items found in very high level areas can have random quality, can have up to 30%. Quality currency still cannot apply more than 20% to an item. Items that can have a maximum of 2 sockets now have a very low chance of generating with 3 sockets in high tier maps. Items can have a maximum of 1 socket, have a very low chance of generating me 2 sockets in higher tier maps as well. This is again one of those base item changes that allows us to be chasing down better bases to work with for the higher endgame gearing. Abyss map has been renamed to Marrow. Okay. Atlas passed the 3 changes, which were extensive according to the picture that we saw. The before and after picture. The skill tree was massive. The detailed records expedition node will pass the skill now provides +1. Oh, sorry, I was thinking the skill tree. This is Atlas, my bad. Detailed records expedition node will pass it down grants plus level of expedition logbooks found in your maps. And expedition logbooks found in your maps always have 4 implicit modifiers instead of 3. No longer provides a 30% quantity of logbooks dropped on runic monsters. The He Approaches Ritual node now provides revived monsters from ritual ritual altars in your maps have 40% increased chance to be magic and rare, previously 20. It no longer costs a ritual favors your maps a 30% increased chance to obtain an audience with the king, since that will now be splinters instead. SS Rework, now 4 tiers, lesser, normal, greater, perfect. Instead of adding a modifier of a certain tag, SS has now added a specific modifier depending on the tier of essence and type of item it is being applied to. Lesser, normal, and greater essence can upgrade a magic item to rare, adding a guaranteed modifier. Perfect essences, however, and essence is obtained through corruption, remove a random modifier, and then augment a rare item with a new guaranteed modifier similar to a chaos orb. Add a 7 new type of essences. Essence of Torments have been renamed Essence of Aberration. Hysteria now augments different guaranteed modifiers based on the type of item it is applied to. General improvements. Unique strongboxes now have their own unique minimap icons. Minimap icons to the Rain Festival Beetle. Delwyn no longer appears alongside the Spirit. I mean, these are just kind of whatever. Skills persistent. Maybe we should read it anyways, actually. Skills persistent yet now sell to vendors for gold based on their level of quality. Who do I no longer place in your hideout? They'll be able to identify items from him in towns. Doriani will continue to serve as a source for identifying items once you complete the campaign. Certain boss arenas, enters no longer have a teleport for party members to enter after the fight has started. These players can instead just walk in. You're now able to log directly into your town or hide up by holding control while selecting a character. Okay. You can now use checkpoints to warp to the waypoint in an area as well as other checkpoints. Okay. Omens can now stack with a maximum stack size of 10 or with chance to receive new 3D art. Uncut skill gems supports reservation gems can now be traded through the currency exchange. That's nice, actually. Party members can no longer fruitlessly attempt to open expedition portals. NVIDIA Reflex has been re-enabled. Okay, so now we're on player changes. When holding down the dodge roll button, your character will now get into a sprint. Sprint's available for all characters classes, and there's no limitation to how long you can sprint for. However, if you get hit while sprinting, you get knocked down, and that's fucking you over. The primary purpose of this sprint feature is to make navigating areas faster when out of combat, though if you do take a hit while sprinting, it will fall to the ground. You can no longer socket multiple copies of the same skill gem into your main skill socket. Wait, hold up. You can no longer socket multiple copies of the same skill gem into your main skill sockets. So you can't have a shockbot storm mage and then an army of damage dealing storm mages. Skills not granted by gems and skills socketed and persistent buff skills do not count towards this limit. You still have multiple copies of specters or tame beasts, but only one of each kind of monster. It does not apply to specters or tame beasts. But a way a lot of his minion players have been doing is we're running 1 or 2 shock bots, and then we have an army of our damage dealing minions, and then a bunch of others because of whatever the support gem is called that gives you more damage per each unique type of minion. But that means like Storm Mage build will now not be able to run a specific shock bot and then have the rest of your minions, that your main source of minion, be another type of skeletal mage, or Storm Mage in this case. Okay. I mean, it makes it easier to grasp and understand the whole skills thing, because the Storm Mage thing, the only way we could do that is to unsocket the first Storm Mage, then cut another Storm Mage, then add both in. So, yeah, okay. Attribute requirement, all equipment has been lowered, particularly in endgame. Endgame base types on average have around 20 to 25% less attribute requirements. Massive change, by the way. Same thing applies to skill gems. Fire damage no longer inherently has a chance to ignite. Instead, it inflicts flammability on an enemy based on the damage dealt. Flammability is a debuff that lasts for 4 seconds, grants all fire damage against the enemy, including the hit that applied flammability, a chance to ignite that enemy equal to their flammability magnitude. Multiple hits can stack flammability independently, meaning that a target being hit frequently and or hard enough will consistently have a 100% chance to be ignited. Effects which don't hit but ignite targets as though they did, such as incinerate or ignite the ground, also inflict flammability, but are not able to ignite targets until the target has 100% flammability. So we can't cheese flammability with something like Flame Wall, for example, it's my understanding. Anything that removes, consumes, or grants immunity to ignite does the same for flammability. These changes do not affect how ignite itself functions or is calculated once it's been applied. These changes also apply to any other non-fire damage that becomes capable of igniting and to enemies. Some enemies deal non-igniting fire damage over time, which is not affected by these changes. Shock now lasts 8 seconds instead of 4, but it still only lasts 4 seconds on players. Okay, I mean, that's good. Chill is 8 seconds, previously 2 on non-players by default. It still lasts 2 seconds on players. Chills on any target are now discarded if their magnitude is less than 30. Previously, it was a 5%. So now you have a minimum threshold to chill an enemy being 30% instead of a 5% threshold. Overflow effects on life matter energy shield can now overflow the maximum by up to 1.5 times instead of 2. This was how we cheesed a lot of defenses on the old version of Grim Feast, where we would have twice our energy shield. Now they're bringing that double overflow down to 1.5 instead. This nerf here was actually quite expected quite some time ago. It does apply to the Blood Mage though. Blood Mage is a pretty cool change. It's going to be fun to see the Ascendancy changes in this patch note. Light stun chance of less than 50% are now treated as 0, previously described as less than 10%, but actually less than 20 for a monster being stunned and less than 12% of players being stunned. Elemental exposure now has 15% less effect on magic, 30% less effect on rares, and 50% less effect on unique monsters. Unarmed attacks now has a base crit strike chance of 5% instead of a 0. Glory now decays if you haven't gained any for 15 seconds instead of 30. Oil ground duration is now refreshed when it catches fire. That's kind of massive for the Vol guards, actually. Gating guard while you already have guard no longer replaces the existing guard buff if the new amount of guard you would gain would be lower than what you already had. Instead, the duration of the existing guard buff is extended proportional to the amount of guard in the buff, a new buff compared to the old buff. Okay. Ice crystals now instantly shatters from hits and could consume freeze, as this is now default behavior. Glacial Cascade and Fragmentation round no longer specifically call out this behavior. Add a new mechanic called Elemental Fusion that many elemental spells interact with. Some skills create infusions of a specific element as remnants on the ground, which can be picked up to grant you the infusion. Other skills can consume infusions of a specific type to grant additional bonuses depending on the skills. Some skills consume infusions that match the skill's elemental type, while others have cross-elemental infusions. I think this is really cool for the elemental caster build, especially with all the other changes to it. I think this is going to be very interesting to see caster builds utilizing multiple elements. The following bit renamed to avoid confusion with the new elemental infusion mechanic. So there's just a bunch of renaming of things. Reloading a crossbow and switching crossbow ammunition no longer reduces the player's movement speed. Blocking is no longer limited to strikes and projectiles by default. All hits that are not specifically unblockable with a red flash can be blocked. Raise, shield, and parry now require you to face the enemy that is hitting you rather than the direction from which the hit originates. Some monster skill for which directionality is unclear has been changed to be blockable from any direction using these skills. Okay. Player, minion, and monster base maximum block chance is now 50% instead of 75%. Bro, when they said they were going to lower the max block chance, the passive block chance, I thought they were going to bring it down to like 65, 70. That took away 25% of it. Holy shit. That's kind of big, though. Huh. That's actually big. Yeah, it's the base. If you raise a shield, you can block, but then you get stunned if you overblock it, right? The shield block break, basically. Took away a third of it, yeah. Effects which set the maximum of volatility now properly do so instead of being additive with a default cap of 200. Players now gain +6 accuracy rating per level instead of 3, and each point of dexterity now gains +6 accuracy instead of 5. Accuracy fallout penalty now linearly interpolates from 2 meters down to 12, the maximum penalty being 90% less accuracy rating at a distance of 9 meters or further. Previously, there was no maximum, and at 14 meters, you had 100% less accuracy rating. Players' minions now always hits with their attacks. So I'm like, okay, we don't give a shit about accuracy anymore. Players' projectile skills now fire at a minimum of 1 projectile, even if they should fire 0. Okay. Swapping weapons is now instant. This is a big change. All charge Kasumi skills now pause the corresponding charge duration while in use. Elemental damage recouped as life and physical damage recouped as life now display the life in section of the character's panel. Clarified on the stun keyword that monster melee damage has 33% more light stun chance and heavy stun buildup, and monster physical damage has 100% more light stun chance and heavy stun buildup. These bonuses are multiplicative with each other. Note that this is purely a description change. Okay. Updated the ice crystal keyword to clarify that it blocks movement of a smaller monster, while larger monsters will destroy any crystals in their path. Updated keyword pop-up from main to include its base duration. Ascendancy changes. Oof. I'm curious about the reaping staff, if they're gonna give reaping staves like actual access to plus level of minion skills, because we've seen that we're able to give them spirit, but if the reaping staff is supposed to be used for minions, we are gonna need plus level of minion skills in there, because most minions are not spell tagged, which means that plus level spell skills will not apply to them. We'll see. All right, Ascendancy changes. Warbringer. The answered call notable passive skill now also provides +1 maximum number of totems. Ancestral Spirit skill granted by the answer call notable passive skill no longer grants minions from this skill have a 1% accuracy rating per 3 dexterity. Instead, minions of this skill now increase attack speed per 3 of your dexterity. Interesting. Great Wolf's Howl notable skill has been removed, and the Warcaller's Bellow notable now also provide ignore Warcry cooldowns. Then the Renly's Training notable passive skill now grants 35% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value, previously 40%. Turtle's Charm notable passive skill no longer grants 25% less block chance or can block damage from all hits while shield is not raised. Instead, it now provides you take 30% of damage from blocked hits, and maximum block chance is 75%. Stacks of Jade no longer lost when taking physical damage from a hit. Ancestral Spirits from Answered Call notable skill has also been improved. They now appear faster and start using skills sooner, so basically a Warbringer minion buff. The Jade Hulk no longer charges. It instead uses a Warcry to buff nearby allies to have 50% increased damage, while their Leaf Flame has also been improved. Ancestral Jadecaster has had its spellcasting range increased. The Pinning Jade Storm has had its area effect increased, and the delay between it forming and exploding has been reduced. I really want to try to make us do like these total minion builds. Warhorn's buff and Horn Slam have had their area effect and duration increased. Turtle's Aura has had its area effect increased. There's big buffs basically. Smith of Kitava Flowing Metal notable passive skill now causes body armor to grant 35% of armor, which will also apply to elemental damage from hits. Previously caused body armor to grant 5% max fire S. That's pretty big actually. 35% of armor to apply to elemental damage. I mean, that's not bad. The leather bindings, I'm kind of curious about this. What everyone's opinion are on the idea of armor having ways to mitigate elemental damage, because I know that D4 was laughed at when they spent an hour explaining how higher armor will also mitigate elemental damage, and it was just so fucking weird. And now GGG are like, well, you know what, hold up a minute, now we're gonna add ways for modifiers, ways for people to make their armor also mitigate elemental damage. Maybe this is the right answer to make armor more attractive in PoE specifically, but I'm not sure. I mean, right now, physical damage isn't as scary as elemental damage. So maybe this is the answer for PoE specifically. Anticlaus, thank you so much for the 41 months. Leather's body notable passive skill that causes the body armor to grant regenerate 3% of maximum life per second instead of 5. Manifest weapon skill, which I was sad to say is not like an animate weapon build, but you know. Granted by the living weapon, notable passive skill no longer grants minions from the skill have increased accuracy. Instead, it's increased attack speed per dexterity. Small passive skill provide fire rest now have values of 8% instead of 15. The small passive prior to living weapon now grants 5% increased strength instead of minions deal 20% increased damage. Okay. Gemlin Legionnaire. This one will be interesting. The advanced thaumaturgy notable passive skill no longer grants 30% less skill cost of skills or skills gems have 30% more attribute requirement. It now grants thaumaturgical dynamism buff, which while active causes you to passively generate power, frenzy, or endurance charge once every 8 seconds. The type of charge you generate is determined by the attribute requirements of your socketed skill gems. The higher the total strength requirements, total your socketed skill gems, the more likely, not guaranteed, but the more likely you will be to generate an endurance charge and then dexterity for frenzy, intelligence for power. All right. I'm not sold on this one. The gem studded notable passive skill no longer grants you to use each type of support gem an additional time in the different skills. Instead, it now provides for each color of socketed gem that is the most numerous gain. Red hits against you have no critical damage bonus. Blue reduces skill cost. Green, less movement speed penalty from using skills whilst moving. Is it just me, or do I feel like the Gemlin Legionnaire just took a big fat bat to the face? I mean, that's kind of how it feels right now, at least from what I'm reading. Maybe I'm way off here. I don't play it enough, but I mean that's what I'm reading. Ay. Tactician, though. The cannon is ready. Notable passive skill now provides +1 maximum number of summon totems. The right where we wanted notable passive skill now grants projectile damage builds pin. Polish the gear notable passive skill now provides gain deflection rating equal to 20% of armor and no longer grants 100% of armor as extra stun threshold. That's kind of big. I think deflection is going to be a massively utilized defensive mechanic in the game, because it feels a lot like the way deflection is made. It reminds me so much of glancing blows in last epoch. Because the glancing blows was like, you had to have glancing blows. Like that was kind of like the idea back in the day in LE, at least. It feels like deflection will take that role in PoE too, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Suppressing fire notable skill now provides 40% more immobilization buildup instead of projectile damage builds pin. Supporting fire skill granted by the Unleash Hell. Notable passive skill no longer grants minions the skill have increased accuracy. Instead, it's increased area of effect per 3 dexterity. The death from above command for supporting fire now deals approximately 3 times more damage at all gem levels. That's kind of big. The whoever pays best notable passive skill now provides there is no limit on the number of banners you can place, and banners gain 5 glory per second instead of you can place multiple banners. Okay. Strategic embankment notable passive skill which requires cannons ready. This causes your totems to grant embankment auras to players when placed, which grant a different effect depending on the variety of totems. Ancestral Warrior Totem is 40% glory generation. Ballista is 40% immobilization buildup. Dark Effigy is increased damage over time. Mortar Cannon is 15% of damage gained as extra fire. Siege Ballista is 50% increased damage against immobilized enemies. And Shockwave is 30% AoE. Okay, Ritualist. The As the Whispers Ask, a notable passive skill, has been removed. I don't know that one by heart. Which one is that? Oh, so it's the Ritual Sacrifice one. Okay. And that's the Whispers Demand notable. Well, also grant the Ritual Sacrifice skill. Okay, so they bake them together. Ew. Now, we are using it, MP. It's just one of those, like, okay, we have nothing else to put points in for the minion build on the Ritualist. Wildwood Persistent notable passive skill now grants 10% life recovery rate per 5% missing unreserved life instead of 5. Okay. Amazon Critical Strike notable now gain additional critical strike hit chance equal to 50% of excess chance to hit with attacks previously 25. No longer specifies it ignores hobble on the ground. The Elemental Surge notable passive skill, previously Elemental Infusion, now grants 3 surges when consuming a Power, Frenzy, or Endurance charge instead of 2. Pathfinder, the Sustainable Practice notable passive skill, now grants 50% evasion rating. Also grants Elemental Damage reduction instead of 30. Poisonous Concoction, granted on Poisonous Concoction, notable passive skill choice, has been renamed to Acidic Concoction. This concoction consumes charges from your mana flask to throw a flask that explodes, dealing physical damage in an area. The thrown flask consumes poison on a hit and causes acidic burst, which deals damage based on the highest expected remaining damage of poison on... Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Let me read that one more time. The thrown flask consumes poison on hit to cause an acidic burst, which deals damage based on the highest expected remaining damage of poison on the target. Okay, now I got it. Acidic Concoction, Acidic Burst cannot poison. Acidic Burst deals unscalable physical damage equal to 150% of the expected remaining damage of the consumed poison and has 30% more area effect per poison affecting the enemy. Okay, I had to read that a few times to get that. Fulminating Concoction, granted by the Fulminating Concoction notable passive skill choice, no longer inflicts lightning exposure on it. It now has 50% more shock effect. Quality now grants up to 40% more chance of shock, previously 20% increased effect of lightning exposure. Shattering Concoction, granted by the Shattering Concoction notable, now inflicts elemental exposure on a hit instead of just cold. This is one of those changes where all of the elemental specific exposures is now elemental exposures all together. It now freezes enemies on hits that are primed for freeze. Quality now grants up to 20% increased freeze duration instead of the effect of cold exposure. Bleeding Concoction, granted by the Bleeding Concoction notable passive, no longer has 200% more magnitude of bleeding inflict, now aggravates bleeding on target's hit instead, which basically means the bleed is doing damage as if the target is moving. That's what aggravated bleeding is doing. Explosive Concoction by that node no longer has 200% more magnitude of ignite inflicted and no longer inflicts fire exposure. It now fires up to 4 additional mini flash projectiles at ignited enemies. Quality now grants up to 2 additional mini flash projectiles thrown at the ignited enemies instead of whatever it had before. Explosive Concoction quality no longer grants effective fire exposure, instead granting up to 2 additional mini flash projectiles thrown at the ignited enemies instead of up the fire exposure. The swarm sounds insane, yeah. All right, Deadeye. Dude, I'm just waiting for the witch changes. I was told that there were some massive witch changes. The Avidity notable passive skill no longer grants 30% chance to gain maximum frenzy charge when you gain a frenzy charge. Instead, it grants 50% chance to gain an additional frenzy charge when you gain a frenzy charge. Call shots no longer lets you apply an additional mark. Instead, it causes your projectiles to chain to marked enemies and grants the new called shots meta skill that repeatedly marks enemies near you, bypassing your mark limit. Oh. The Eagle Eyes notable passive no longer removes the distance-based accuracy penalty. Instead, it applies 20 stacks of critical strike weakness to enemies when you consume a mark on them. That sounds pretty dope, actually. Invoker, though. Elemental Expression skill granted by and scatter them to the winds. Now deals significantly more damage with a fire explosion. Significantly more damage across the board on all 3 elements. Okay. The Meditate skill granted by the Faith is a choice. Now has a cooldown of 7 down to 5.1 seconds at gem levels 1 to 20. Previously, they basically lower the cooldown on it. Meditate now provides more energy shield recharge rate. Significantly more energy shield recharge rates than the previous numbers. Okay, so they just buffed Meditate. Acolyte of Chayula, the reality of rending notable has been renamed to Sap of Nightmares and no longer grants chance to gain a percentage of damage with hits as extra chaos damage. Instead, it now grants Leech recovers based on chaos damage as well as Fizz. I have no idea what he said, but I got mods in the channel, so I'll trust their judgment. The Lucid Dreaming notable passive no longer provides any benefits itself. Instead, now being a multi-choice notable with the following choices. Choice of life. All flames of Tayula you manifest are red. Choice of mana. All flames of Tayula you manifest are blue. Or power. All flames you manifest as purple. The Into the Breach skill granted by Awakened Dreams notable now grants Remnant spawn by supporter skill has increased effect. Grasp of the Void notable passive skills renamed Illusory Void no longer requires Embrace the Darkness. It no longer provides the 1% extra chaos damage per 20 unreserved darkness and instead now grants the skill Void Illusion. Is this the one we talked they showed in the video where they dodged it would deal a bunch of chaos damage? The Embrace the Darkness skill notable passive skill now has Darkness Restoration lasts 5 seconds instead of 10. Inner Silence notable passive skill has been renamed the Deepening Shadows and no longer grants 50% reduced Darkness Restoration duration. Instead now grants 1% increased maximum darkness per 1% chaos rest. Oh. I mean, are these changes enough to push the chunky Chayula monk to actually be good. Because it's a little bit out of my comfort zone, personally. Ravenous Doubt's notable has been renamed Inner Turmoil. No longer grants mana leech recovers based on other damage types as well as physical. Instead, it now grants gain 1 volatility on inflicting elemental ailment and take no damage from volatility. Interesting. Consuming Crush is notable from renamed to Unraveling and no longer grants you cannot charge energy shield or mana leech effect also recovers energy shield. Instead, it now grants chaos damage from hits, also contributes to ignite, freeze, and shock. Changing every 2 seconds. I hate these things. I fucking hate them. I hated the Pendulum of Destruction or whatever the node was on the Elementalist in PoE 1. I cannot stand when you have an effect that's doing something you want for X amount of time and then it changes to something you don't want. On the other hand, there are changes right now that will actually benefit you applying both ignite, freeze, or shock, for example. So I mean, there's definitely ways for this to be beneficial in PoE 2 at least. And maybe I'm off, maybe I'm wrong here, but I've never liked the pending type of effects personally. Small passives prior to Sanguimancy has been removed, and now when you spec into Blood Mage, you get Sanguimancy directly for free, which basically means the Blood Mage just got 2 extra Ascendancy nodes. The Life Remnant skill now grants spawns a Remnant on hitting a target instead of on critical hits. You don't have to crit to create a Life Remnants. That's kind of big. Gore Spike passive now grants increased critical strike damage bonus per 50 life instead of 40, and a swapped location with the Sunder the Flesh notable passive. The Between the Cracks notable passive skill has been renamed to Sanguine Tides. No longer provides critical hits, ignore monster armor. Instead, it now provides gain 1 life flask charge per 4% life spent. Oh, and 50% less life recovery from flasks. It now has, when your life flask reaches full charges, 40% of its charges are consumed and gain 1% of damage as physical for 3 seconds per charge consumed this way. Interesting. Open source notable has been renamed to Whispers of the Flesh and no longer grants your curses have infinite duration. Instead, it now grants enemies affected by your curses have at least 15% of your life of their life reserved. Okay. All right, Infernalists, please be good. Please be good. Infernal Hound, granted by the Loyal Hellhound, now ignites enemies within 2.5 meters instead of 1.5. Okay, so a little bigger radius of ignitions from the Hellhound. Okay. Fine. Pyromantic Pact notable now grants Infernal Flame equal to twice your mana, previously equal to your mana, but causes you to lose 25% of Infernal Flame per second if you haven't gained any in the past 2 seconds, which was previously 50%. Huh. Are they pushing us into Pyromantic Pact play? Demon Form, this one's big by the way. Demon Form granted by the Demonic Possession no longer disables your weapon or has its own weapon set. It no longer grants level of all spells. Wait, it no longer grants level of all spell skills or increased spell damage per Demon Flame. It now grants 3% spell damage per Demon Flame and quality now provides 10% cast speed while in Demon Form. Okay. The Lich, though. The Dominion. I thought there was going to be massive witch changes. This is not massive. The Dominion over Flesh notable passive skills were renamed Incessant Cacophony. It now grants your curses have infinite duration instead of your curses can affect hexproof enemies. Okay. The Eldritch Empowerment notable passive skill no longer provides non-channeling spells cost an additional 3% of maximum energy shield. Non-channeling spells deal 30% more damage or spending energy shield does not interrupt recharge. Instead, it now provides spells deal 30% more damage when sacrificing energy shield and sacrifice 5% of your maximum energy shield when you cast a spell. And sacrificing energy shield does not interrupt recharge. The Price of Power notable passive skill no longer grants non-channeling spells consume a power charge if able to deal 25% more damage. Instead, it now provides spells consume a power charge if able to deal 40% more damage. So that means basically what they're saying is that these things will now work with channeling skills. That's basically what I'm reading here now. That's basically the only change to the Lich. So ascendancy-wise, from what we've seen so far, hasn't had any major impact at first glance on the choice for minion builds, but without PoB updated, it's impossible for me to tell what other changes we might want to do, which might open up other ascendancy choices than we normally have, because mostly this comes down to defensive scaling, especially with the attribute requirements of things going down on gear and skills. We might see more companion use. We might see some more dexterity skills being used for minion builds. We also might see, you know, if life is really that good, maybe we'll see some warrior stuff. Maybe the Infernalist becomes a better choice. We have no idea how it's going to look until I actually see a PoB update. So for the sake of minions, I can't tell based on the ascendancy changes what I would do until I see the actual skill tree. Like, it's impossible. I don't think any of us can do it. I can make an educated guess, but in the end, it would be just that. It would just be a guess. But so far, none of the changes have been like, whoa, this is so cool for minions when it comes to the ascendancies. At least yet. And with the sprint, I need to feel that, because one of the reasons we play the Ritualist for the build was because Ritualist gave us very easy access to increased movement speed, which made it feel less ass to equip Bones of Ulr. But now with sprint being in the game, maybe we don't need that. We also have the perk of sprint might make us not feel as forced to use Blink, because Blink, you know, reserved 100 goddamn spirits. All right, we'll see. Chronomancer, the Flood of Echoes has been renamed inevitably. Let me try that one more time. Flood of Echoes, the flood of Echoes has been renamed to Inevitability. Inevitability. It no longer grants the Unleash skill, instead now grants a new skill, Inevitable Agony, which curses all targets in the area after a short delay, causing a portion of the damage they take from hits to be stored in the cursed debuff. When the debuff duration expires, they take that stored damage again all at once. I have never liked this approach. Also the same reason why I'm not a big fan of the current iteration of Hex Blast, for example. Quickset Hourglass notable, no longer grants every 10 seconds gain 50% cast speed for 5 seconds. Instead, it now grants Sands of Time, which grants 60% cast speed, scaling down to 1% over 10 seconds, at which point it then scales back up to 60%. Okay, so I'd rather see this than, hey, here's a big buff, now you have nothing. Here's a big buff, now you have nothing. Now it's here's a big buff, and as it goes down, you get less, and then up again. That feels less ass than here's a big thing, now you have nothing, here's a big thing, now you have nothing. I'd rather have this effect than... no, but it also makes thematic sense to the idea of it being Sands of Time, right? It also grants increased area effect in the same manner, but I'm not a big fan of these nodes either way. But I'd rather see this than the nothing or, you know, all or nothing kind of approach. Yeah, it's like elusive. Yeah. Stormweaver, the elemental storm skill granted by the Tempest Caller, has its cooldown lowered to 3 seconds at all levels instead of 5. Rain Dancer, renamed to Multiplying Skulls, and no longer provides 150% more cooldown recovery rate for Elemental Storm. Instead, it now provides +1 limit for elemental skills. Force of Will notable, no longer grants increased effect of Arcane Surge on you per 25 max mana. Instead, it will now grant 20% increased, it now grants 20% off damage is taken from mana before life, so minor matter effect. And 20% increased magnitude of Arcane Surge on you per 10% missing mana. The Scouring Winds have been renamed Storm's Recollection. No longer grants exposure. You inflict lowers effect that are resisted by an additional 12%. Instead, it now grants Remnant to create reappear ones 3 seconds after being collected. Oh. Part of the Storms were renamed Refracted Infusions. No longer grants 40% of elemental damage taken recoup as energy shield. Instead, now grants 50% chance when collecting an elemental infusion to gain another different elemental infusion. Interesting. And skill tree changes. I mean, these don't really help us much. What I want is the JSON file so I can actually look at it. Where is Jason? I haven't seen Jason. I need Jason in my life. He's a dope guy. I love the dude. I just need him and his work right now so we can see the tree. That's what I need, all right? Okay. Giant's Blood Keystone passive skill now halves the amount of life granted by strength. Fuck all the warrior players out there. Giant's Blood cuts the life on strength by half. Okay. Glancing... Oh my god. That's funny. Glancing blows keystone passive now provides a chance to evade is unlucky. A chance to deflect is lucky. It no longer provides a block chance is double, or you take 50% of damage from blocked hits. Interesting. So it's a deflect keystone now. The rest of the technique passive now grants accuracy rating is double instead of your hits cannot be evaded. That's kind of big for some builds for sure. Let's see. 8 new clusters between. Okay, so a bunch of new clusters. So the tree sources of increased area effect have been lowered by 25%. Okay. Dace buildup has been replaced with chance of dace on hit with adjusted values. Sources of reduced reservation of skills now are granted increased reservation efficiency. Many existing classes have also received updates. Each change may result in your existing passive tree being forcibly refunded if you have allocated nodes around the area where the layout changed, which is basically everywhere. Small attribute passive skills have been removed on all of the outward highways between class starting locations. Skill changes. Base damage scaling of all player spell and secondary damage skills have been tweaked to scale better in the late game. Generally speaking, spells that do not have damage number changes called out below will have near identical base damage at low levels, roughly 5% more damage at level 20 and roughly 20% more damage at gem level 30. Okay, mana cost of growth of all skills have been rebalanced. Generally speaking, skills will have similar mana cost at low gem levels, potentially slightly higher mana costs at some intermediate gem levels, and lower mana costs, sometimes dramatically lower at gem level of higher than 20. Batters no longer gains valor or have any other valor related stats, but instead generate glory when you attack enemies. They all require 200 glory to place. Unlike other glory based skills, batters can gain glory while the banner is placed. All sources of banner valor gained have been replaced with banner glory generated. Okay. Banners now have a global limit of 1 allowed to be placed, but there are ways on the passes tree or tactician ascendancy to increase this. Cursed skills are skills that apply elemental exposure now can't apply those debuffs to enemies that are significantly higher level than the skill's own level requirement. This requirement is fairly lenient and disappears completely by high gem levels. Okay, so you can't have a low level exposure just to get a free way to apply that. That's actually a pretty decent change, to be fair. Blink, Convalescence, and Sacrifice can no longer be activated in specific weapon sets. They are now required to be active in both weapon sets and will fail to activate if this is not possible. This is to prevent people from weapon swapping to do a blink and then weapon swapping back. Okay. I mean, okay, that's kind of fair. Higher rarity enemies are now less affected by curses. Curses have 50% less effect on magic, 30 less on rare, and 50 less on unique. The movement speed penalty inflicted by skills that can be used while moving now begins to fall off slightly more quickly while using the skill. Spirit costs of specters have been adjusted such that specters with high spirit costs are generally cheaper, while some of the cheaper specters are now more costly. So they're doing their first attempt on balancing spirit cost of specters, essentially. This will, I mean, I can't say anything on this until I actually get to see what the fuck they did. Now, we do have a massive, and I mean massive, Spectre document. Let me see if I can get access to it. If I can see the Spectre document. It's just loading. I gotta talk to him because he made a website for it. The guy who did it. Fantastic fella, by the way. So I gotta check with that. But I mean, I can't say anything till we see this. We'll have to dig through the data mine for this drastically to tell what we're gonna do. But it does look really interesting because they also increase the damage of these things as well. Spectres attain bees now deals 25% more damage at all the gem levels, which is absolutely massive, by the way. In instant skills such as Unbound Avatar are now usable while on the row amount. Mark skills are no longer spells. Reservation skills that had reduced reservation with quality now increase reservation efficiency with quality. Killing Palm, Staggering Palm, Shattering Palm, Handed Chula, Frozen Locust now deals damage based on your equipped quarterstaff. They no longer have flat added damage or additional critical strike chance. Palm skills can no longer be used without a quarterstaff equipped by default. Shockwave Totem, Ancestral Warrior Totem, Artillery Ballista, and Siege Ballista now use equipped weapons. They no longer have their own flat damage, base critical hit chance, and base attack time. That's actually quite a big change to these. I like this. Ancestrally boosted slabs have 25% increased area effect instead of 20. Also fixed a bug where the area effect bonus by ancestral boosted slabs were described as multiplicative instead of additive. Following skills found in inherent skills on one stage now deal approximately 12% more damage to skills level 11 and onwards. Bone Blast, Chaos Ball, Decompose, Fireball, Freezing Shard, Lightning Bolt, Power Siphon, and Solar Orb. As the Warrior Totem now have no limits. Socketed base skills now have 50% less attack speed. Arc is now a projectile. It no longer causes explosions against shocked enemies and is no longer a payoff skill. It now chains 6 to 9 times to gem level 5 to 20 instead of 5 to 8. It now has 50% more shock magnitude and can consume a lightning infusion to gain additional times, to chain additional times and deal more damage, and deals 2 to 39 gem level 5. And basically just a big damage buff across the board. Quality now provides 10% chance to not remove an infusion, but still counts as consuming them instead of the 2% more damage for each remaining chain. Interesting. Again, weaving into the elemental infusion gameplay approach that they're looking for. Archmage now has non-channeling spells gain 4% damage as extra lightning damage for each 100 mana instead of 3. So they're buffing Archmage. Artillery Ballista has been renamed Siege Ballista, now has a duration of 8 seconds instead of 16. The Bolt's attack speed is now 25% of base. Bolts deal 25 up to 66% attack damage, which is a slight drop down from the previous version. Bolt explosion radius is 1.4 instead of 1.8 meters. Explosion damage has been dropped down a little bit as well. Quality provides up to 0.3 meters to bolt explosion radius. The previous quality was total base attack time was increased, or rather decreased. Ball Lightning can now consume a fire infusion to leave a trail of ignited ground and explode at the end of its travel. Batter Shout explosion deals 50% more damage against unique enemies. Berserk is increased effect of rage. No longer grants physical damage, leeches its life per rage. Bind Spectre quality now provides minions to deal more damage instead of reduced reservation. More damage, by the way. That's a multiplicative scaler. Again, I can't make a call on this. It's impossible for me to determine this without having the Spectre information, but at least it's a multiplicative damage scaling modifier rather than the reservation, I guess. I mean, we'll see. We have no idea how big of an impact this is. It's not increase, it's more, it's multiplicative. That's actually a massive damage scaling boosts. This is big, by the way. Like, I would rather have this, objectively speaking, than I would with this. But it also depends on the spirit balance costs that they're doing as well with the balance changes. Blink, using Blink no longer counts as dodge rolling. Now has a minimum gem level of 8 instead of 14. Bone Offering. Spike duration is now 8 seconds instead of 5, while the explosion radius is 2.4 meters instead of 2. Explosion damage was significantly buffed. The buff now has minions take 20 to 25 reduced damage from hits while shielded, and also now has absorbs first hit, dealing over 25% of minions maximum life. Quality now provides shielded minions to take 0 up to 30% less damage for 1 second after shield is lost, instead of the 40% more physical damage on explosions. So they're making Bone Offering more of a defensive focus to your minions. I wonder if they ever fixed the lack of minions not getting rage from things like Font of Blood. I haven't seen any changes to that yet. Or maybe that's in bug fixes. Bone Shatter Shockwave now deals 100% more damage against unique enemies. Okay. I honestly, I still think we should just never use Bone Offering personally, but whatever. Castle Freeze, Castle Shock, Castle Ignite have been combined into a single gem. Cast an Elemental Ailment. This gem requires 100 spirit, has a minimum level of 14, combines the energy gain conditions of all 3 previous gems. Existing copies of this gem will be updated to cast elemental ailments when you load the character's stash tab holding them. J-Rock, thanks so much for the 41 months, man. Appreciate that, dude. I think I missed a bunch of subs earlier. Sorry about that. There's a Singing, Rayloth, Reds. Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Chaos Bolt, granted by Withered's Wand. Now inflict 1 to 3 stacks of Withered for 4 seconds on hit. Gem levels 1 up to 20. Cluster Grenade, primary grenade attack damage has been significantly buffed. Mini grenade attack damage has also been buffed, not as much though. Now fires exactly 18 mini grenades in a Nova instead of 14. And mini grenades are fired over 17% increased radius. Cold Snap has been reworked and is renamed Snap. And it can now be used on any orb spell or any frozen, shocked, or ignited enemy, causing an explosion of the corresponding damage type and creating a remnant of the corresponding type of enemy type from the enemies. This explosion can shade react to a limited extent from enemies hit that are affected by the same ailment. Now it deals less damage on the cold front, but now you have lightning and fire approaches to it instead. Okay. Now quality grants 10% chance to spawn an additional remnant. Previously it was 20% chance to not consume the freeze. Comet has seen a slight damage buff, a little bigger, about 20% on the high end. Can now be fire infused to deal extra fire damage and gain base radius. Contagion quality now provides contagion targets a 0 up to 2 additional enemies when cast instead of the maximum debuff damage bonus from spreading. Defiance banner aura now grants 30% more armor and evasion rating. Previously it was 6 to 9% and 30% movement speed, previously 5. Now has a duration of up to 9.8 seconds instead of 6.9. And banner is no longer removed when you leave the aura. Quality now provides 10% increase in reservation efficiency instead of aura magnitude per valor. Despair curse inflicts down to 49% chaos rest instead of minus 24. Holy shit. Holy shit. Let me read that again. Despair curse now inflicts minus 41 to minus 49 chaos rest instead of minus 20 to minus 24. What the fuck? On the other hand, you have a 50% cut on unique enemies, which would be 24.5%. So it's basically well, decimals will round down in PoE. So we end up on a same scaling as before versus at least uniques, but anything that's not uniques will be better. That's still pretty cool though. I kind of dig it though. Get stronger on non-unique enemies. Yes, but it's same on uniques at least. Disengage quality now provides 20% chance for additional shockwave instead of increased cooldown recovery rate. Dread banner aura now grants 0.5 flash charge per second instead of 0.17. 60% elemental ammo threshold, previously 12 to 15. Now grants 4% max all rest. It no longer provides 12 to 15% more stun threshold. Now has a duration of 9.8, similar to the other banner instead of 6.9. Banner is now no longer removed when you leave the aura. The quality is reservation efficiency instead of magnitude per valor. Same treatment as the dread banner, as the other banner, sorry. Earthquake Jagged's grounds radius is 1.8 meters instead of 2.2, so lower the radius of that. Aftershock damage got a pretty big buff, and the radius is up to 3 meters instead of 3.4. So the radius went down, the damage went up on the Jagged grounds radius stuff. Okay. Earth Shatter quality provides up to 6% more damage hits for each spike instead of the maximum spikes, and detonation now also triggers existing spikes. Electrocuting arrow, no longer a movement skill, now shoots an arrow forward that explodes. Apply its electrocuting rod to all enemy hits. Quality now causes the hits against targets while with attached rods to gain up to 10% of damage as extra lightning instead of previous arrow duration going up. Elemental Sundering pulse can now can consume up to 20 ailments instead of 9. Cold explosion deals 40% more damage. The cold now also deals 100% more damage against unique enemies. This is something we saw with the video. Ember Fusillade can now be infused with lightning to cause each ember in an entire fusillade to create a beam that chains lightning damage to enemies. The infusion is consumed when the fusillade fires all embers in that fusillade. Now has a minimum gem level of 9 instead of 3. Emergency reload now reloads all of your crossbow ammunition clips. Previously just your most recent, that empowers each clip's ammunition to deal increased damage for its duration or until you expend all your empowered bolts. Now as a number of each clip's empowered bolts is equal to the maximum ammunition of the clip. Enfeeble no longer has curse makes non-unique targets deal up to 26% less damage, or curse makes unique targets deal up to 60% less damage. Curse now makes target take a deal up to 29% less damage at gem levels up to 30, and that's cut in half, which is 14.5. So that actually made Enfeeble worse against unique enemies. Interesting. Escape Shot now creates ice fragments in this area of effect. These fragments explode after a short duration to deal additional damage. Additionally, it now causes you to travel 6 meters back instead of 4.5. Explosive Spear, the ignited ground created by the frenzy charge explosion, now lasts 8 seconds instead of 4. Eye of Winter, when passing through an allied flame wall, the eye itself and now all the shards it's subsequently released will receive the flame wall's added fire damage. Fangs of Frost explosion now costs 150% more freeze buildup at level 1 instead of 50. Gain 9% more per level instead of 6%. Quality provides up to 50% chance not to consume a parry debuff instead of up the increasing melee strike range. Fireball no longer creates a secondary firebolt projectile by default. Instead, it can consume a fire infusion to do so. Now, as a minimum gem level 3 instead of 9, primary projectile and explosion now deals the increased damage, and the high end has been significantly buffed as well. Secondary projectile now deals increased damage as well, which is also significantly scaled on the secondary projectile. Secondary projectile can now hit the same target as the primary projectile as well. Oh, that's quite interesting. Firestorm now has a base radius of 2.8 meters instead of 5.6. What the fuck? And creates 1 bolt every 0.2 seconds, previously every 0.1. No longer consumes ignites to create improved bolts. Instead, it can now consume every type of elemental infusion. Fire infusion causes the storm to double in size, which would be back to its original size, and create 3 times as many bolts. Cold and lightning infusions cause the storm to create additional cold and lightning bolts, respectively. 1 of each infusion can be consumed by a single use of the skill. Fire bolt damage is now lowered quite a lot. So basically, Firestorm is the kind of skill that you kind of don't want to use without infusing it. That's an interesting change, kind of forcing you to engage with the elemental infusions to make the Firestorm actually good. Interesting. Flame Wall can now consume a lightning infusion to grant additional lightning damage to projectiles that pass through it, as well as the fire damage. No longer costs the projectile that passes through it to ignite enemies. Now deals flat damage per second to enemies in the wall at certain gem levels. And now ignites as though dealing that damage, which is actually lower than the damage dealt, scaling up to lower than previously. Now as a base critical hit chance of 5% instead of 0. Flammability, collectivity, and hyperthermia has been recombined into a gem called Elemental Weakness. Existing copies of this gem has been adjusted to update, but will not receive updated item art. Okay. Fragmentation rounds. Explosion from frozen enemies now converts all physical damage to cold and will cause further explosions when the frozen enemies and hits, though this cannot propagate any further. Explosion radius now 2 meters instead of 1.8. Hits against frozen enemies now 100% more damage against unique enemies. Okay. Frost Bomb. As its damage lowered, and the high-end damage level 20 is lowered as well. 6-second cooldown instead of 3.5. Now has a 4-second detonation time instead of 3. Instead of a 3-second duration before exploring. Okay, so just making Frostbomb worse with those changes. Then they say, now chills enemies as though dealing 300% more damage, and now applies elemental exposure instead of cold exposure. It initially applies 20% elemental exposure and 2% per pulse, up to a maximum of 50%. Quality now provides up to 10% more maximum elemental exposure applied. Previously, it was increased cold exposure effect. Frost Wall now deals 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds of its duration. Okay. Frostbolt base projectile speed has been lowered by 20%. No longer leaves chill ground as it travels. Instead, it chills as though dealing up to 195% more damage. Projectile now deals less damage than before, both the low end and the high end of the gem levels. This changes and not affect the explosion. Okay. Frozen Locust Ice Crystal now deals 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds. Galvanic Shards ammunition no longer has 50% less reload speed. Now has 1 bolt loaded per clip instead of 5. What? Projectile attack. Okay. Projectile attack damage is now increased quite a lot. While the beam attack damage is quite drastically increased as well. It now fires 8 fragments per shot instead of 6. And has a mana cost that has been lowered as well. Quality now provides +2 fragments per shot instead of bolts loaded per clip. Interesting. I never played with the Galvanic Shard, so I can't really argue for that. Gas grenade no longer has a special behavior causing it to detonate as soon as it stops bouncing. Instead, it strictly obeys its detonation time like other grenades. Glacial bolt ice crystals now have 50% more area effect if shattered. Ice crystals deals 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds. I don't really understand why this changes there. Maybe someone else could enlighten me on why they're changing to deal less damage in the first 0.5 seconds. Like, was this abused or something? What have I missed? Glacier's Cascade no longer consumes freeze on enemies. This is because of the dumb boots. No longer consumes freeze on enemies to deal 350% more damage. It consumes freeze on non-unique enemies to deal 150%, and consumes freeze on unique enemies to deal 500% more damage. So they kind of like allowing a lot of these skills to really capitalize on you being able to freeze an actual boss to deal a stupid amount of damage. You're rewarded for that. Burst radius is now 0.6 meters instead of 0.5. Final burst radius is now up to 1.2 meters instead of 0.7 meters at all levels. The radius of the glacier cascade has been increased. Quality provides physical damage that's extra cold at a 5% higher top end value. Instead of 10, it's now 15 on the quality. Okay. Hailstorm rounds. Bolts now fall in an expanding circle around then overlapping with each other. Now has an impact radius of 1 meter instead of 1.2. Rain radius of 4 meters instead of 2.5. One bolt now falls every 0.1 second instead of 0.3. That's pretty big. There's no longer a minimum distance the bolt can land from the firing location, and now deals a bit of more damage across the board. And has increased freeze buildup. Ammunition now has 100% more reload speed instead of 50% less. At least the speeding is up. A Herald of Thunder bolt impact radius is now 1 meter instead of 1.4. Hex Blast. Quality now provides 10% more damage per 1 second of remaining duration of removed curse instead of 0 up to 20% more chaos damage. Okay. Okay. I haven't played Hex Blast enough to make a statement on that either. Same thing with all of these route skills. I'll just read them out for those of you who are interested in it. High velocity routes no longer consumes fully broken armor. Instead, hitting a fully broken enemy will apply a debuff to the enemy which causes your attacks hits against the enemy to deal additional physical damage equal to 5% of the physical damage dealt by the high velocity route that applied the debuff. Ice Nova can now consume a cold infusion to deal more damage and create a chilled ground. We saw this in the video. Same thing with Ice Shards, dealing significantly increased percent of attack damage, and arm after 1.5 seconds now deal 300% more damage after arming. They now deal 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds of their duration. They no longer deal 700% more damage after 0.5 seconds. Projectiles now deals up to 29% of attack damage at gem level up to 20. Previously 33, so small nerf there on the high end. Now has an arming time before which it will not explode, even if shot directly under the enemy. Quality now provides shards of shields enemies as though dealing up to 100% more damage instead of shards that have existed for at least 0.5 seconds to deal up to 200% more damage. I feel like I'm missing out a bit for not having played with the crossbow skills at all. Incendiary shot now has ignite you inflict with skills are 200% faster, and now also has 30% increased ignite duration for each pellet that hits a target. Now inflicts 300% more flammability, previously 100%. Quality now provides up to 15% increased ignite duration for each fragment that hits a target instead of the ignite magnitude. Incinerate has been reworked. It now requires fuel gained by spending mana to use. The fuck? It no longer has a mana cost itself and no longer applies fire exposure. Its cast speed is now fixed, and it gains a stage every 0.25 seconds. Its cone length is 5.8 meters instead of 4.6. Now has 12 maximum stages instead of 8. No longer creates burning ground by default. Instead, a fire infusion can be consumed to cause it to create ignited ground. Ignited ground radius of 1.4 meters instead of the previous 0.8. Its minimum gem level is 13 instead of 5. Beam now has 50% less ignite duration instead of 25%, and deals 30% more damage per stage instead of 40. Beam now ignites as though dealing significantly more damage than it did before. This is quite interesting though, with the incinerate changes. You get fuel to cast it, which is based on mana, like by spending mana to use it. Huh. Infernal Cry though now empowers 1 attack per 10 enemy power and range, counting up to 50 power. Previously it was 1 attack plus an additional attack per endurance charge consumed. I mean, that's better. No longer has the 38% increase Warcry speed while empowered. Attacks now gain up to 49% of damage as fire instead of the 5% per 5 power of enemies in range up to 100%. Infernal Cry's Combust now deals a little less damage than before, though it now deals significantly more damage at gems levels past 20. Now allows you to expend an endurance charge to bypass the cooldown rather than consuming endurance charge to empower additional attacks. Quality now provides empowered attacks gain up to 10% of damage as fire. Previously it was 10% damage as fire, damage per 5 power of enemies in range, up to a maximum of plus 50%. I mean, that sounds like a pretty decent change to it. Now being able to bypass the cooldown by expending endurance charges. Killing Palm now grants 1 power charge when culling a normal or magic monster, 2 when culling a rare monster, and 3 when culling a unique. Lightning Bolt granted by Choir of the Storm unique amulet, now correctly typed as a triggered skill. This means it will scale off of increases and reductions of triggered skill damage as well as the other similar stats. Also means it no longer will be capable of generating energy to trigger other skills. Oh. Lightning Conduit no longer consumes shocks when targets hit, but has a 6-second cooldown, and it's now dealing significantly more damage across the board on all gem levels. Now has 2 additional bolts if a shocked enemy is in targeted area. Previously 1 to 4 additional bolts if targets is previously 1 to 4 additional bolts hit targets if at least 1 shock consumed. Quality now provides 0 to 5% more damage with hits per 5% shock effect on enemy instead of the 20% chance of consuming a shock on an enemy to reapply it. Lightning Rod quality now provides 20% chance to cause additional burst on impact instead of the radius increase in the burst radius. Lightning Spear now fire 5 secondary bolts at all levels, since previously it was 3 up to 8 depending on the gem level. No longer deals more damage when consuming a frenzy charge. Living Bomb and Solar Orb have swapped places. Living Bomb is now a tier 5 elemental skill gem, while Solar Orb is an inherent skill to Pyrophyte Staves. Existing items are not affected by this change. Living Bomb no longer explodes at the enemy's duration, instead explodes upon dealing sufficient damage to the enemy or just by killing it. Now drops a Fire Infusion Remnant on exploding. It now has a base duration of 5 seconds instead of 2.5. Magma Barrier now passively increases your chance to block whilst active. Over time, it charges up with lava. While fully charged, your next block with your shield raised will spray lava in front of you and grant you an endurance charge. Now it grants 25% increased block chance. Magma Spray has a 6 to 8 out of 5 damage per 15 evasion on the shield. Has a radius of 2.8 meters. And Magma Spray deals 12 to 103 to 20 to 155 base offhand fire damage at gem levels 3 to 20. Previously 23. Is that increased? It's a little lower damage. Sorry, let me read that one more time. 324, that was lower damage, but it increases the amount of percent attack damage to compensate. Okay, I mean, it sounds quite interesting. It's not within my territory of the builds that I enjoy to play, but it does sound quite interesting because it gets a ton of increased percent attack of your attack damage compared to before. Mana Drain granted by the attuned ones now leeches a shitload of mana and now has a 70% reduced mana leech rate at all gem levels. Quality provides up to 90% additional mana leech, which was tripled from the previous version. Mana Remnants grants a stupid amount of mana, which was buffed. Quality now provides each remnant to grant even more mana than before by about 30%. Mana Tempest now has a minimum gem level 7 instead of 9. Molten Blast now steps backwards instead of forwards if used while moving in the opposite direction to where you're targeting or attacking in place. Now inflicts 200% more flammability and has 100% more ignite duration. The secondary projectile count can no longer be modified. Quality now grants up to 30% chance to inflict elemental exposure instead of just providing fire exposure. The Overstorms one I think is quite interesting actually. So Overstorms now trigger for casting any spell in its radius instead of just lightning spells. It now creates a lightning infusion remnant if all of its bolts are used up or its duration expires. It now has a maximum of 8 bolts at all gem levels, previously 12 to 29 at gem level 3 to 20. Now has its base radius of 3.6 meters instead of 2.8 meters. And it deals more damage at lower level gem level, and it deals significantly more damage at higher gem levels. Now fires a bolt every 4 seconds, and when you use a lightning skill near the orb, previously every 3.4 up to 2.5 seconds, 2.55 seconds actually. Orb duration is 12 seconds instead of 10. Overwhelming Presence and Withering Presence are now described as aura skills and have the aura tag. Okay. Perfect Strike now has an attack damage of a little lower percent damage scaling, and Perfect Strike now has a plus 35 melee strike range instead of plus 14, so it's a massive range to it. Permafrost Bolts have a massive freeze build-up compared to before. Now has a 49% attack damage at level 20 compared to 62, so slight damage nerf to it, but it does have a massive freeze build-up change. Plasma Blast. 50% more magnitude of shock inflicted, no longer has 30% chance to shock. Projectiles now converts 80% of fist damage to lightning instead of 70% conversion. Poison Burst Arrow, quality is more magnitude of poison inflicted instead of magnitude of poison. What? Quality now provides 20% more magnitude of poisons inflicted instead of increased magnitude of poison inflicted. That's quite a big change. Rain of Arrows, quality now provides arrows fall 20% faster instead of firing extra projectiles. Race Zombie quality is going from now provides 25% increased effect of empowerment on Race Zombie instead of 20% more minion movement speed. Still shit. Like, the problem with zombies is that they are not permanent or reviving minions. They're temporarily summoned similar to on Earth, and they're harder to achieve a reasonable process of summoning compared to on Earth, which makes Race Zombie already by default very rough to utilize. And the empowerment is like, it doesn't help if you have to keep resummoning them on a consistent basis between packs, and when that process is rough to deal with, makes them very inconsistent to utilize in general. Hopefully there will be other changes to making that changes to that, but that's my current take on it, which what we've seen in the 0.1 and 0.2. Rake is no longer incorrectly tagged as a travel skill. This tag was left over from an earlier version of the skill that traveled much further without a target, whereas the released version of Rake does not meet the criteria for a travel skill. Please note that this was not a balance motivated change. Consistency is the primary goal of gem tags, and we would have nerfed the Rake plus Stomping Ground interaction in a different way instead if it was appropriate for Rake to retain the travel tag. Huh? Rapid Assault, the spearheads are left by the final strike now last 30 seconds instead of 10. Rapid Shot no longer has delay before firing bolts or 50% less reload speed. It now has 100 maximum ammunition at all gem levels instead of 50 to 87, and up to 45 maximum heat at gem levels up to 20. Previously was only 24. Now deals 94% of attack damage at gem level 20. Previously was 47. Okay. Quality now grants 15 max heat instead of 0 to 5. Heat no longer grants rapid shot damage gain as fire. Instead, reaching maximum heat prevents you from using the skill for 10 seconds. It now generates heat once per attack instead of once every 0.25 seconds. Heat now begins decaying after 4 seconds without gaining heat at a rate of 10 heat per second. Heat no longer grants grenade skills damage gained as fire. Instead, explosive grenade and cluster grenade consumes 15 heats to gain 50% of damage as fire damage, while incendiary shot consumes 30 heat to gain 50% more heat, ignite magnitude. Whew, that's a lot of text. Holy shit. Will you be playing more slots tonight? What? What do you mean playing more slots? I don't play slots. I don't gamble. I don't have the money to lose to gamble. The fuck? Roa mount now grants 15% increased movement speed while mounted. However, it grants 80% less movement speed penalty while using skills, previously 100%, approximately canceling out the bonus while using a skill. Okay. Ripwire ballista has been renamed artillery ballista. It now fires a hail of bolts into the air, landing in an area, hitting all enemies within that area a number of times equal to its projectile count. Bolts now fire 4 projectiles instead of 5 and deals 40% damage at level 20 instead of 153%. Bolt's attack speed is now 25% of base instead of 100. The ballista now has a duration of 12 seconds instead of 16. Quality now grants an additional up to 200% more pin damage instead of 50. Rolling slam. Zombies have to be empowered always now, and the gap between unearth has been increased. Zombies are still as fast as I think if empowered, so sort of above, because you should only use empowered zombies in the first place if you're using them at 100% increased damage. Now 125% with equality. Sure, but each zombie you summon will need you to consume a power charge. Good luck generating enough power charges, then summoning your zombie army to be useful when you move to the next pack. They don't follow you. If you outrun your zombies, they don't teleport to you like a reviving minion. We have the same issue with Unearth. What then happens is they just disappear and die. That's the same problem with Unearth. The difference is Unearth can be used on corpses and your skeletal, revivable skeletal corpses as well. Whereas the way to summon the summoning process of zombies to make sure they're empowered requires a power charge. That's the biggest problem with it, making them very inconsistent to resummon at that consistent rate, whilst not being able to bring them with you. And the mana consumption is huge for the high zombie level as well. Same applies for Unearth on the other hand for that as well. But yes, that is part of the issue. Rolling Slab now has a plus 1.5 seconds total attack time instead of 1 second, but no longer has an attack speed penalty. Quality is increased stun threshold instead of causes days build up to deal 50% of physical damage dealt. Okay. Scavenged plating, 4% more armor per scavenged plating at all gem levels instead of 3 to 5%. 6 to 8 thorns per scavenged plating at gem level 4 instead of 8 to 12, so they nerfed it. And the higher level as well, quality per scavenged plating duration to get increased instead of more armor per scavenged plating. Siege Cascade impact now deals 145% attack damage level 20 instead of 91, so it's a big buff to that. While the explosion deals 543% attack damage instead of 398 at gem level 20. No longer deals 200% more damage against immobilized enemies. No longer has a hidden 100% less stun buildup against enemies, and converts 80% of physical damage to fire damage, or has to pay off and fire gem tags. Payload radius is 0.4 meters instead of 0.5, while the bolt explosion radius is down as well by 0.2 meters. The delay between the payload and the bolt explosion is 0.6 seconds instead of 0.3. I never like these delay things when they're making those changes to it. Don't your minions dying count as corpses? And don't we have an ability that uses corpses to generate power charges? That should be the case. Yes, I would assume that would be the case. Sorry, yeah, that should be the case. Sure. That does not help. You still have to then have your minions die, then cast an ability to get a power charge, then summon your zombie. It again emphasizing on the problem I was talking about when it comes to zombies. The summoning process is a very frustrating several step process to get them out as empowered minions. Then they kill the pack. You move to the next pack. In more cases than not, you have to repeat that entire process to get your minions out. That is why we don't use zombies, because they're useless if not empowered, and to empower them, it's a huge process to go through that any other minion build would outperform it. Seismic Cry cooldown is no longer reset if it doesn't empower attacks. Okay, now heavy stuns enemies that are primed for stun and empowers attacks if a heavy stunned target, as well as if it hits heavily stunned targets. Now empowers 1 slam per 10 monster power and radius, previously 1 + 1 per endurance charge consumed. No longer has 200% increased knockback distance, 4% more stun buildup, or hits ignore enemy monster physical damage reduction. Instead, now allows you to expend an endurance charge to bypass the cooldown, similar to what we saw with the Infernal Cry, rather than consuming endurance charge to empower additional attacks. Quality now provides empowered attacks after shock deals up to 10% more damage instead of the increased Warcry speed. Shield charge skills base movement speed has been reduced by 25%, but it no longer has a cooldown. Now it has a base attack time of 0.6 seconds instead of 0.5. Now it deals up to 100% more damage based on the distance traveled. Area of effect now deals 94% attack damage level 20 instead of the 254. While the collision now deals 217% attack damage at level 20 instead of 906. Quality now provides deal up to 40% more damage based on the distance traveled instead of the CDR rate. Shield wall curvature has been reduced, and wall is now approximately 40% longer by default. Now has a base explosion radius of 4 meters instead of 3. It additionally damages enemy in close proximity to the wall in all directions while exploding. You can now use shield charge to bash straight through the wall, while when the wall is destroyed by your own skills, the entire wall is destroyed at once rather than only nearby segments. However, this can only deal damage to each enemy once. It now has a 235% attack damage at level 20 instead of 281, and it has 100% more damage if destroyed by your skills. Now it deals 80% less damage if destroyed by enemies in the first 0.5 seconds of its duration. Quality now provides up to 40% more damage if destroyed by your skills, instead of can have up to 2+ shield walls active at a time. Using a shield wall with a target location out of line of sight will now cause you to use the skill towards the direction rather than fail. Okay. Shock burst. Like it seems like this here is just, it's so weird. Because it's like, hey, I'll place a skill. I can't combo with it immediately. I have to deliberately wait half a second before it has its full effect. I don't know how I feel about those changes. Shock burst rounds, pulse explosion attack damage to be lowered by approximately 15%. Shockwave total slam now has an attack speed of 50% of base instead of 100. Slam deals 66% attack damage at level 20 instead of 211. Jesus. While the jagged ground eruption deals 237% attack damage at level 20 instead of 53. So there's the compensation for it. No longer has the physical tag. Quality is +4 up to 4 seconds to totem duration instead of totem base attack time going down. Shockwave totem cannot itself create jagged ground, and supports no longer apply to shockwave totem. Huh. Siphoning strike shockwave now takes the size of monsters into account. Quality now provides up to 50% chance of days out hit instead of the stun buildup. Skeletal arsonists. Oh, we're in the minion section now, boys. Skeletal arsonist explosive demise is now an attack instead of a spell, dealing 300% attack damage. Now deals additional fire damage equal to 8% of the minion's maximum life instead of 12. And can now target minions with 1096 life or less instead of 913. So they're increasing the threshold they can do it on, but it's dealing less percent of its max life of damage, but dealing 300% of attack damage. Skeletal Brute has a new command skill, Shattering Roar. We saw this in the footage. Shattering Roar is a war cry that intimidates nearby enemies and consumes freeze on enemies and allies to deal damage in an area around those targets. Skeletal Cleric quality now provides revived skeletons are immune to damage for up to 3 seconds after being revived, instead of the more maximum minion life. Skeletal Frost Mage has a new command skill called Ice Armor. It coats minions in an area in frost, reducing the damage they take from hits, causing enemies that hit them to take cold damage, and counts as frozen for other effects and skills. Quality now provides the minions deal up to 20% more damage instead of reservation. So when I use an Ice Armor, it coats all my minions No, it's in an area. So I have to do an area target with the ability, and the minions in that area will be coated in frost armor, which the brutes can then shatter. Okay. Well, the ice command is more like you provide ice armor. You can either use it for the minions to stay alive, I guess. I mean, to my understanding, it feels more like the Frost Mages is there to create ice armors to keep your minions alive if you have a melee army attacking, and depending on the radius, but I guess you can scale that with like magnified effect and whatnot, create a big block there to provide an ice armor for your minions to have them stay alive, or you'll utilize it as a way for on like temp summon minions, say on Earth or something. Not sure if it works in SRS, but basically give them ice armor so that they're counted as frozen for the purpose of the brute using their command ability to explode them for massive explosions. That's what I'm hearing, at least. Skeletal Sniper, however, command gas hour cooldown is now 6 seconds instead of 8. Gas clouds now deals 80% attack damage instead of 70. Quality provides more damage instead of reservation. So basically they're removing the reservation or the quality and giving minions multiplicative damage scaling for quality instead. Storm Mage's command Death Storm now deals a shitload more damage, and shock ground radius is now 2 meters instead of 1.8. Projectiles now chain 2 times at all gem levels instead of 2 up to 4. What the fuck? What I'm hearing is that there's going to be some pretty cool things with the brutes and the frost mages to create explosions. That I think we'll see. But based on what I'm seeing more and more, it feels to me more likely that you could have storm mages then exploding these dead minions to create some pretty cool effect there. But like the base attack stuff feels kind of in general, personally. When it comes to storm mages, at least to me, it sounds a lot like if you want to have damage dealing minions, we're kind of going back into maybe pushing for melee minions to be the attacking minions in general now, especially with the leap stuff. I think that'll be really good because melee minions already did a stupid amount of damage. So maybe reavers or brutes, we'll see. So I don't know, we'll see. But the only way reavers are going to be benefiting a lot from that is actually if the fucking reavers would benefit from Font of Blood. No, sorry, Font of Rage, which did not give minions rage. That was a bug, and I hope they fixed that. We'll see, though. I mean, the time will tell. We'll see the skill tree as well. Snipe Explosion, no longer guaranteed critical hit. It doesn't have increased critical strike damage bonus. Explosions now deals a lot more damage, and has a radius of 2.8 meters instead of 1.6. Perfectly timed arrows that hit a frozen or heavily stunned enemy now cause a larger explosion, deals more damage. Quality now provides up to 0.4 meters explosion radius. Solar Orb no longer has a mana cost. Pulses deal increased damage than before. The Ignite now ignites as though dealing a shitload more damage. No, sorry, I'll take that back. Just a tiny bit more damage. Spark can now be cold infused to fire a large number of icy sparks in a circle, dealing both cold and lightning damage. Spear of Solaris initial hit now deals approximately 29% less damage, while the Pulses now deals 50% more damage. The Ignited Ground now gains 100% radius of the ground spear's lifetime, previously 30%. Now deals 67% more damage. Quality provides 25% chance to retain 40% glory and use instead of the 40% magnitude of Ignite inflicted. Spear Field now grants 204% attack damage at level 20 instead of 49%, but it now deals 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds of its duration. It no longer has an unintentionally hidden 300% more damage after 0.5 seconds. Okay. Storm Wave now additionally hits targets slightly to either side of your character. Storm Blast Bolts Explosion deals 470% attack damage level 20 instead of 388%. Charge Bolts duration is 10 seconds instead of 8. Sunder no longer has a 0.9 second attack total time, but now attacks at 35% attack speed instead of 65. No longer consumes fully broken armor to guarantee critical hit. Instead, it inflicts sundered armor on fully armored broken targets, inflicting an additional 20% increased physical damage taken for a duration. Adjusted the damage area more closely match the visual effects. Supercharged Slam attack now deals 254% damage instead of 156, but now has a 40% more damage with hits for each stage instead of 60. Tempest Bell quality is 3% more damage per hit. The active bell is taken instead of bell is destroyed after 2 additional hits. Temporal Chains has just been giga buffed in terms of the curse effect as a result of the unique enemies having 50% curse effect reduction, and it's at 50%, so it's actually slightly nerfed. Very tiny. Thunderous Leap quality provides 30% chance to leave shocked ground when detonating spears instead of the meters of shockwave radius. Holy shit. How far have we gotten? Oh, good lord. Time of need. Attribute requirement ratio is now 75% strength and 25% intelligence. Previously 100% strength. Okay. Toxic Growth Pustules now deals 100% attack damage at level 20. Previously 42 at all gem levels. Now a rain skill no longer causes you to leap into the air on use. Now has a barrageable tag. Trinity now applies all elemental damage instead of elemental attack damage. Quality now grants skill speed instead of attack speed. It's now dexterity intelligence skill instead of pure dexterity. Unearth can now be used on dead skeletal reviving minions once per death to create a bone construct. Bone construct created by Unearth now has a dash attack that they can use to close the distance to an enemy. Quality now also increases bone construct movement speed. That was needed and we talked about a lot. The description has been updated to indicate that larger corpses can create more than one bone construct. Ooh. Unearth is back on the menu. Well, not back. It's finally on the menu. Vaulting Imp. Actually, this I like. I like this. This is actually pretty fucking good. Yo, what's up, Scribblet? I'm on the phone with this party zombie. Dude, this is looking really good, man. What, like the stuff Yumi and Olas have been talking about, this is actually really nice. Vaulting Impact, though, now allows you to jump over enemies and small amounts of terrain. To support this, a number of changes to camera movement has been made to result in a smoother camera movement during the skill. Now deals 499% attack damage level 20 instead of 445. Now escalates days, cause a portion of the damage dealt by the vaulting impact to be taken by also sequential hits until the days expires. I need to unnerf SRS. Yeah, Helmbreaker was sending me a message about it as well. Like, I still don't get why they're making it only summon 2 a cast. It's like, they need to make that 3. Volcanic fissure now creates 2 branches that emerges from either side of the main fissure. We saw this in the footage. The length of the fissure is now affected by area modifiers. Now has a minimum gem level 7 instead of 9. 80% of physical damage converted to fire instead of 60. Now it deals 145% of attack damage level 20. Previously it was 163, so slightly lower. Aftershocks cannot trigger more than once every 0.2 seconds. Quality provides 20% chance to cause an aftershock instead of plus 4 seconds to fissure duration. Allied slams now trigger volcanic fissures. Re-triggers are now treated as aftershocks that will scale with the aftershock specific effects. Oof, we're almost done with skills. Holy shit. Send GG a strongly worded letter? No. I'm not going to do that. I think that most of these changes have been actually really good so far. And I'm very happy with what they've done. I'm not going to send them a strongly worded letter. I will simply ask them about it and hopefully they'll change it. Voltaic Grenade now applies the electrocution debuff to enemies on hit for 6 seconds. Now has a 340% more electrocution buildup from hits with its skills at gem level 20. Previously it was 50% at all gem levels. That's a massive change. 327 attack damage level 20 instead of 714. So they lowered that end of it. Okay. Vulnerability is giga buffed as a direct result of the unique enemies having 50% curse effectiveness reduction on them, which is resulting, based on these numbers, in lower armor broken by vulnerability. I don't know, man. I never liked the vulnerability curves. War Banner is seeing the same treatment. 25% more attack damage instead of 5 to 6. 50% increase in accuracy rating, previously 30. And 25% increase attack speed. Now has a duration, which is the exact same as the previous banners, 9.8 seconds instead of the 6.9. And no longer removing leave the aura. The quality is 10% reservation instead of more aura magnitude per valor. Wave of Frost now frees enemies that are primed for freeze. Whirling Slash movement is now able to pathfind slightly, making it less likely to get stuck on small obstacles. Whirlwind Lance collapsing. Whirlwind now deals 20% more damage. Whirlwind created by Whirlwind Lance now have a limit to 6 whirlwinds, previously 5, and a duration of 15 seconds instead of 8. Wind Serpent's Fury no longer causes shockwaves when enemies are hit into walls or larger enemies. Quality now provides 30% more knockback distance instead of 30% knock. It's multiplicative instead of additive. It's like it's the same, but yeah, it's multiplicative instead of additive. Wind Blast now dazes on a hit instead of causing daze buildup equal to the percentage of physical damage dealt. Quality now provides up to 20% more damage to enemies within 1.5 meters, scaling down to no bonus at 4 meters or further. Previously, it was increased knockback distance. Updated description for raging spirit to clarify that the flaming skulls do not follow the player's commands as they are busy raging. You know what? The only raging part about SRS is that we want them to summon more than 2 per cast. I mean, it's like one of my biggest issues with the SRS casting being only 2 per cast is that if you want to sustain or maintain a max SRS army, you have no choice but to invest a shitload in cast speed and spam a fire skill all the time. If you don't do that, you are not maintaining your SRS army. And it's so frustrating. And they do want to have this idea of like, hey, we want combo play style. You want to do cast other spells and whatnot. But if you want to do SRS, you're forced into that play style. You're just spamming like your fucking life depends on it. And I think maybe having a significant increase to their duration could help. But I think that it would be enough to just let us have 3 SRS instead of 2. 3 would be enough to make that playstyle less of a nuisance. So that would be my request to it. I don't know what their opinions are balance-wise for it, because then it would be a lot of value for the reservation. I wouldn't mind if the reservation cost would be teeny tiny bit higher as long as we get the cast 3 instead of 2. Like, I think that trade-off would be better. Clarify the addition to radius per stage for Whirling Slash and Whirlwind Last skill description. Wording and representation of Plague Bearer. Up to the description of Thunderous Leap to mention the detonated spare skills. Okay, how far along are we? Oh my lord. Well, these are bug fixes. Okay, so we don't have that much to go. Oh. Unique item changes. Bearer's Anguish. Unique charm now creates igniting ground for 4 seconds. When used, igniting enemies has no dealing fire damage equal to 500% of maximum life. It no longer ignites enemies in your presence on use. I wonder how that poor man's PV2 RF builds will feel like after that. Black Braid unique body armor now has 80 to 120% of armor applies to elemental damage instead of 100. Existing version of this item can be made better or worse with the Divine Orb. Good luck. Bones of Ulr. Unique boots now provide 20 to 30% increased reservation efficiency of skills, which create undead minions. Instead of undead minions have 20% reduced reservation. Ooh, baby. Okay. Existing items will have reduced reservation efficiency, but can be updated with the Divine Orb. It also now has 5 to 15% movement speed. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, this is so big. Oh, baby. Oh, this is so good. Holy shit, man. Oh, I've been asking for movement speed on Bones of Ulr for so fucking long, dude. Oh my god, yes. Holy shit, this is fantastic. We get reservation, which will then compensate the lack of reservation as quality on the gems, which is now giving damage, and then we can also get movement speed on the boot. This is lovely. This is lovely, dudes. Oh my god. Holy shit. Sis had too much fun with SRS at point 1 and Hellhound. Yeah, but point 1 we summoned 5 per cast of Flame Wall. It was different. That was very fun to play, but obviously very broken. In point 2, we're only able to summon 2 SRSs per cast, which is very frustrating. And a couple of us have made SRS builds, which worked pretty well, but it required a heavy investment in cast speed to even feel remotely fine to play. And despite that, all you did was casting a fire spell to summon the SRS. So they definitely do need to address it, in my opinion. Anyways, Risk Wrap unique body armor now has gained deflection rating equal to 20-30% evasion rating. That's a big one, actually. Death Strike unique bow has 25% or 20 to 25 crit damage bonus. Previously 30-40. Exist damage can be made worse. Effigy of Cruelty unique focus now has critical hits with spells. Apply 1 to 3 stacks critical weakness instead of 3 to 5. Malagar's Virtuosity unique gloves now has have your critical damage bonus of 250 instead of 300. This change affects existing versions. Nazir's Judgment unique quarterstaff now has daze and hit instead of causes daze build-up equal to 100% of damage dealt. It also has 30-50% increased melee damage against stunned enemies. Pariah's Embrace unique body armor now provides 20-40% increased mana cost efficiency instead of 20% reduced mana cost skills. Quaddle's Bolt unique body armor now has gain deflection rating equal to 40-60% evasion rating. Tangled Tongue unique spear has 5 to 8% critical strike chance instead of 10 to 20. Sheesh. Whispering Eyes unique staff inflict cold exposure, lowering the total cold resistance by 20-30% modifier, and now applies elemental exposure instead. Right. Soft Blood unique amulet. Enemies in your presence have fire exposure modifier that applies elemental exposure. Following unique can no longer drop and will be reintroduced at a later stage. Inferno Grass, Forbidden Gaze, Thunderstep, Wailing Wall, Fallen Formation, Violent Stake, Deepest Tower is being removed, and the Remembered Tales. Interesting. Red Blade Banner unique shield has 10-15% increased block chance instead of 20-30. Lycoside has 10-15 block instead of 30-40. Merit of Service has 20-25 instead of 30-40. These are all just block chance reductions. Alchem is 15-20. Oak Sworn 20-30 instead of 40-60. That's pretty big. Dunkelhold is 20-30 instead of 30-50. And Blood Barrier is 10-15 instead of 20-30. Doomgate unique shield has 80-100% increased block chance from 80. And now you take 25-40% of damage from blocked hits from 20. Okay. For Deepest Tower, yeah. What's the difference, by the way? The reservation deficiency and reduced reservation. They're streamlining the actual wording of it to be easier to understand for most people instead of having two different wording doing the exact same thing essentially. Distilled emotions have been renamed to liquid emotions. Okay. The 3 lowest tiers of liquid emotions now called diluted liquid emotions, while the 3 highest tiers are now called concentrated liquid emotions to better distinguish between the tiers. Diluted and concentrated liquid emotion now also have received new 2D art. Orbs of Chance are now more likely to succeed on amulet, rings, belts, and charms. Oh. More Vol Orbs are now found during the Trial of Chaos and less often from other sources. Following omens can no longer be obtained. Greater annulment, dextral alchemy, sinistral alchemy, omen of dextral coronation, and omen of sinistral coronation. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't remember what any of those do except for the alchemy and the annulment one. The talisman of Eshta now provides 10% increased cost efficiency instead of 6% reduced cost of skills. Yeah, they're like used as omens anyways, right? For the most part. Items with inherent skills can now rarely drop with skills level up to level 20 in higher tier maps. Okay. Modifiers and martial weapons can roll up to 25% crit strike damage bonus, previously up to 39. Existing damage can be maybe worse. Corruption implicit on martial weapons now has 5 to 10 crit damage instead of 10 to 15. War Pick, Battle Pick, Strife Pick, one-hand mace implicit modifiers are now 5 to 10% crit damage bonus, previously 10 to 15. The implicit modifiers of the Construct Hammer, Structured Hammer, and Fortified Hammer, one-hand mace now provides 4% chance to daze and hit. Previously caused daze build-up equal to 100% damage dealt. Reduce the number of increased block chance modifiers on shields from 7 down to 3. Highest tier modifier now has 30% increased block chance instead of 81. These changes do not affect existing items. Corruption implicit on shields, that is 10 to 20, 15% increased block chance instead of 30-40. Iron runes that gives increased fist damage on martial weapons have been reduced as well. Iron runes to increase armor on armor pieces also been reduced. Damage is extra fire cold lightning has been reduced. Mind runes mana has been increased on wands and staves. Storm runes for stun threshold have been increased. Sackable rune of the sky is 5% extra damage of all elements instead of 6. Jiquani has been increased 1% extra life instead of 2 is now 3. Same thing with the mana one. The martial weapons free spill up is 10% higher instead of 20, so that's a 50% buff. Max Colres on helmets instead of all armors. Fire res on gloves instead of all armors, and lightning rest on boots instead of all armors. And Ascapa is 10% quantitative gold drop as slain enemies on gloves instead of 5% on all armors. Okay. Block got hit pretty hard, yeah. Topotanti is 25 elemental aim on threshold on boots instead of 15 on all armor. 20% charm charges gained on helmets instead of 10% on all armors. 50% reduced slowing potency and debuffs on your own boots instead of 10% on all armors. Reduced critical strike damage bonus on body armors and shields instead of 10% on all armors. 25 armor applies to cold damage. Fire and lightning is helmet, glove, and boots accordingly instead of 20% on all armors. Atmo's Soul's Core of Retreat now applies to Foki. Okay. Whatever that fucking name is pronounced. The Core of Foulness is flat. Chaos damage has been buffed. Fox Talisman is 30% increased presence instead of 20%. The Owl is 10% CDR instead of 5%. Stag is 50 thorns crit strike chance on helmets. Previously increased exposure effects. Stag, sorry, I didn't read. Ox is 10% block chance of shields instead of presence effect of boots. Fuck eye. Cat is increased accuracy rate of gloves. Previously hits against you have 50% reduced critical strike damage on boots. Ralakesh is 8 RMR of minion skills instead of 5% reduced reservation. So now it only applies to minion skills. Okay. Okay. But as long as the minion damage one is stronger, this is not going to be used. Tikaba, blah, blah, this one, whatever, 5% crit damage instead of 12. Suffix modifier. Wait, where's the minion one? Am I stupid? Where's the minion damage one? Did I just skip it or something? Or it's just not touched. Well, then we're still gonna use the minion damage one. Okay. Soul Core. Tigapa. We saw this one. Add a new suffix modifier that can roll strength armors. Maybe we can use those as the new belts. Possibly, but we're still favoring the damage mod over the reservation, though. Then if it's scaling the same, then we'd still favor the damage over the restoration. New suffix modifiers can roll straight armors. Private level 33, grant percentage of armor applies to elemental damage. Suffix modifiers can roll on dexterity, grant percentage of evasion rating is deflection rating. Suffix modifier on intelligence body armors for level 33 that grants fast start of energy shield recharge. Modifiers that increase energy shield recharge rate that roll on foci. Now rolls on intelligence helmet, gloves, and boots. The lowest tier modifier granting level to all skills of a specific type on two-handed weapons now have a value of +2 instead of +1 to 2. Damage gained is extra elemental damage, increased mana regeneration, critical hit chance for spells, and critical hit spell damage bonus modifiers on stage can now have a higher value than the corresponding modifiers on wands and foci, 50% higher on average. Critical hit chance for spells modifiers on wands and foci can now span 27 to 73, which is lower than before. Hey guys, I'm not sure if you can help at all with this, but if possible, could you ask them about companion affix scaling? As of now, many of the rare affix mods that you can get when you capture companion aren't affected by support or damage increase from passives tree. They don't affect them at all. Stuff like Cypher mod and volatile plants deal basically zero damage because they can't get scale from passive tree or gems. Well, the only thing from the passive tree that should affect minions would be modifiers that specifically say minions. Like if you have a minion that deals a fire skill, you can't spec increased fire damage to your tree. That will not apply to the minions because the ruling is very simple. The functionality is very simple in PoE 2 and PoE 1. Minions are is essentially a separate entity. They're not like a reflection of yourself, like a mirror archer or totems or traps, where the damage scaling and the efficiency of those skills is basically a reflection of you. They copy your stats, they have your skill tree, they have your gear essentially. Minions are their own separate entities. And I know some of you guys might not treat your minions very well, but you have to realize that when you're playing with minions, they are working for you. When you are logging off for the day, they go home to their families. They gotta feed them. They're spending time with their kids and feeding the family and going to bed, sleeping, fucking watching Netflix. Like that's what they do. You gotta take care of them. But they don't give a fuck about the stats of shit you have in your skill tree unless it specifically says that they applies to minions, because then it would apply to them when they're working for you. So you gotta keep that in mind. You gotta separate the two things, right? But I understand that some of the support gems don't always work for some of the skills that is available on the companion specifically. But I'm not sure if they actually had intentions for things like Mana Siphoner and whatnot to be something that you can damage scale from the Tame Beast. It's also something that's very new to it, but I can bring it up for sure. Something like Siphon, Lightning mod from Companion won't scale from Companion's damage, and any minion support gems. It's possible that it's that is treated as a separate skill that the Tamed Beast is using, and that skill doesn't have any tags. I mean, that's just me thinking out loud, but I can bring it up for sure. My minions are living in my basement. Might want to let them out every now and then. They'll perform better if they're happy. That's what I've been told, at least. Let's see. Jewels and Timeless Jewels can no longer roll minion accuracy modifiers. Scepters can no longer roll your allies your press have additional accuracy modifiers. Stacked Talisman Socket Scepter now grants allies your presses deal 1 to 40 added attack lightning damage. Previously, it gave them an accuracy raise, and now we can give them flat attack lightning damage. You're doing an interview with GGG? I hope we are. I've already talked to Jonathan about setting up a tavern talk. He said he was going to talk to Mark about it, and he was going to get back to me, but like they've been super smacked. Gamescom just happened and they had the reveal today, so like I'm not going to stress them about it, but we've asked and we're waiting for Jonathan to get back to me and Darth about setting up a Tavern Talk podcast for it. It would be very fun to do. I'd be very happy to have them on board before the launch. Lesser Depth Root now provides 6 dexterity with target martial weapons set +5. Embroidered gloves, base type, not the ones used by the Leopold's Plus, has been renamed to embellished gloves. Okay. The weapon swap speed, jewel, and corruption modifiers can no longer roll. Monster changes. Lower the growth on monster evasion rating with level. This results in level 80 monsters having 30% less evasion rating than before. Failing to collect all of the hourglass during Sarek the temporal boss fight no longer fails your trial sacrifice, now instead only damaging your honor. If you fail to collect the hourglass, Sarek the temporal now enters a secondary phase where the hourglasses and slow debuff persist, but at a much slower rate. Okay. The life of most Act 3 bosses have been reduced by approximately 15%. Rogue Exiles now get additional life scale 65 onwards, resulting in about up to 70% life increase from tier 1 up to 16. Trent's Foul Spawn can now once again be bound as specters. I'm gonna screenshot that so I don't forget that. That's interesting. That is a very interesting take. These motherfuckers. Interesting. We're gonna have to take a look at this. Non-unique items on Rogue Exiles are now affected by increased rarity of items found in area. Monsters in the Viridian Wildwood unique map now have a lower aggro range while in the darkness. The map version of the Rattle Cage, the Earthbreaker boss, has been renamed Volcar the Emberborn to better distinguish between the two fights. The periodic invulnerability aura monster modifier can only make things immune to damage from enemies. Reduce the number of river hags that spawn the Drowned City. Incrementally improved monster behavior. Quest changes. The hunt begins. Now must be completed in a single instance. You still only have to complete the quest once per league. Sarka the Ardura Caravan now offers the Earning Passage quest reward if you didn't take from her in the Vestiri outskirts. User interface changes. The party members revive UI now displays whether you are too far away to revive a dead party member. Ritual favor UI now displays a number of rerolls available. Thank you. Modifier ranges on items now show a positive sign if the modifier range spans both negative and positive values. Let me read that one more time. I didn't get that. Modifier ranges on items now show a positive sign if the modifier range spans both negative and positive value. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Wisp minimap icons no longer removed from minimap if you run out of range. You're now able to respawn at a checkpoint from the escape menu in the Trial Secamas and Trial Chaos, which will take you back to the entrance of the respective trial. When using a controller, you can now remove buffs from your character when the game is paused. Improve management of cache files on console to avoid... Who keeps a shit about console? I'm sorry, boys. Like, I really don't care. I think it's great that console can play the game, but it's not in my... I'm not interested in it, but, you know... don't want to be rude, but that's just my personal take. You can now control left click or the controller equivalent on an item in your inventory to fill the I have section in the currency exchange. Added support for the import keyword in the item filter. Support multiple custom actually just item filter subs. Added bindable action that allows you to zoom in when using controller. I mean, that's pretty good. Up to the stash UI for controller. Okay, that's great. Controller is the best minion class of the game. You can 2-player solo. Like, I'm not I think the controller support for PoE2 is absolutely insane. I'm not a big fan of controllers. I'm not a big fan of WASD. I'm not a big fan of console play for this. I do know it's really good for the game. I just don't like playing it. That's just my only take on it. I don't have anything else to add. Microtransactions, honestly, we're gonna get everything available soon enough anyway. So there's a bunch of them here. I'm not gonna read through it. And last but not least, we have bug fixes. And the only thing I want to see here is rage from Font of Rage. That's the only thing I care about right now. Bug fixes. Shock district, yada yada yada. Bug skills where cost skills fail to be paid over short term. Okay, whatever. Electrocute, Safety Strike, Perfusion, Twister, Temporal Rift. Curses, a ground effects of support such as burning inscription could sometimes fail to be placed on the ground if cast too close to a wall. Okay. Vaulting impact, concentrated, provide every 10 seconds, gain a random non-damage shrine. Fix the bug with ice shard, second wind, and ingenuity could support minions with a commandable skill but have no effect. They can no longer support these skills. Okay. Fix the bug with the spirit cost of Into the Breach was not correctly affected by the socketable support. Jagged ground. I'm just looking for rage. Font of Rage, please. Concoction skills for also cluster. That's just the elemental army. They will support undamageable minions now that it did anything while supporting them previously. Fix the bug with strike skills, lightning bolt, stun build up, spells for barrage bolt, earthquake, ignited oil, wasn't ignited. Okay. Muster support did not grant damage to temporary minions. Oh. I didn't know about that. Cooldown recovery, formerly ingenuity, was unable to support blink. Tablet modifier, secret, ritual, artillery, soul eater. We're getting more skill spin damage reduction than was specified in the keyword. Explosive fungus, perfect strike, any map. No, it's mark the trigger, rogue exiles, recovery, expedition. Why don't I just control F this? I'm almost done. Omen reinforcement, gloam gown, perfect strike, yada yada yada. Trial of chaos, sometimes be inaccessible to couch co-op. Couch co-op. Cowballs could rarely jump out of the arena. Wow, I didn't even know that could happen. You can have an enable scepter in your offhand while with a disable main hand item. What? Okay. Main hand when you press second, you said put offhand in your main hand when it should. Trade invitations, creating clouds created by gas arrows. It's not here. Font of Rage. It's not there. I just checked it. I don't need to control F. I just literally just manually checked it. Letter type. The letter. Nah. Jonathan is a goddamn G. I mean, that's the entirety of the patch notes. We have now successfully gone through the patch notes. in only an 11-hour stream. That's fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. Crazy. Dude, this has been absolutely fucking wild. I'll tell you that much. Like, genuinely wild. Jesus, I need PUB to be... Oh, at least I need the JSON file to be able to determine more out of this.